we're gonna talk about Charvel really with you. So before we talk about the latest model, I wanted to ask you how you started working with them, how it all began.
Jackson approached me back in 2004. We were towards the end of the tour of The Link, our second album. I was just excited that anybody would give me some free shit. At this point, we were really struggling to have gear, and the only thing I had was an old Gibson that I bought from a friend. It was falling apart. I was fixing it myself, even though I didn't know how to do. So it was all like the intonation was wrong, everything was wrong, and all of a sudden Jackson came through and gave us some gear. So we were really happy about that. But then after, I want to say 10 years almost, playing on Jackson guitars, I was attracted by other things. I wanted to maybe knock on other doors. Maybe Fender, maybe try something more prestigious. And then I called the dude from Jackson and I said, hey, can we do something about that SLS I have? I don't see anything on the Jackson catalog that I really like. And he told me, actually, we also do Charvel, and we want to bring that brand back to life because it was sort of forgotten a little bit. It was not too much out there. So they wanted to develop the Charvel brand, and they asked me if I wanted to be one of the 4 or 5 new faces for the brand and represent it. And I said, it depends. What can we do? Can I have my own signature model, even if it's a bit ambitious because I'd like a telly shape, and it's not Fender. So, but and they said yes, let's go for it. And since that day, it's been an amazing adventure. I have to say, it's really awesome gear. It's heavy. When you hold the Charvel, it's not. You can tell there's something going on. It's good quality stuff. I don't have a very technical language when it comes to guitars, but I know maybe just a few things. But when I play, I can tell if it's good or not.
Yeah. We recently got to play your latest signature model, the mahogany, something that's called the Style T. And it's a really interesting guitar. It struck when I was at NAMM. It stood out to me because it's quite a vintage. It's got a vintage vibe to it, but it seems to have a bit of influence from Gibson, maybe in the bridge. And I just wondered how did that model come together and what inspired it?
Oh man, it's love. From the start. I love music. I love guitars. I love vintage looking stuff more and more, actually. I grew up as a death metal head. I was a death metal head, dude. And all I wanted is like weird shapes, thunder shapes and flying V's and stuff like that. And then as I grew older and I don't know, wiser, maybe not. I started to love, old furnitures, old looking stuff, and being fascinated by old sounds. And what I'm trying to achieve now in the studio is something very authentic. I like to hear a vintage, good sounding guitar and real sound, a drum sound. I'm less into samples and simulations and stuff. I like real deal more and more. And now to a point where I'm a bit upset that computers exist because, thanks to computers, we can have that conversation right now, which is great, and see each other. But, the SSLs and the old consoles have something that everybody's trying to mimic now with machines and computers, and we can't do it. It is possible, it's achievable, but there's something that you can't explain that's happening, the magic of the vintage stuff. So I wanted my new signature that I did with Charvel to reflect that, The one before was very slick, all white and gray and black. This one, I wanted this one to look the way it sounds, because I was going for something more vintage with the pickups as well.
Yeah, with the PAFs, the PAF, not what you consider metal pickup, but it's really cool that you've kind of put your own spin on it, because playing this guitar, the low end is incredible on it, in that bridge pickup.
Yeah.
How did you kind of go down that road?
Yeah, I'm almost a bit ashamed to say that I knew nothing about gear up to just a couple of years ago, when I started to understand how important it is and the difference it makes to move a mic in front of a speaker. Even though I was already producing Gojira albums without knowing anything about sound, that's how I kind of learned through the years. And recently I met with DiMarzio. The people at DiMarzio are very friendly and professional, and they live next to my studio in New York. I mean, one of the dudes, Wilson at DiMarzio, lives right next to my studio. So he contacted our management and asked if he could pay me a visit with some gear. So he brought a panel of pickups, because he heard that we weren't endorsed. So he presented me with all their products, and I knew that DiMarzio was quality stuff, and that's how I realized the PAF 36 was sounding good, and this other mic and this other mic, pickup, sorry, and I A/B'd a bunch of stuff. He made it easy for me because he flipped some pickups on my guitar, so I could compare A/B. I was in recording mode, so I recorded a bunch of parts, and then I recorded the same parts with other mics, pickups. En français, on dit des micros. We say micro for pickups. So I I say mics, but pickups. And I realized that using old gear that is not too hot, that is not too modern, for instance, dynamic microphones versus passive mics versus active mics. The passive pickup has more dynamic.
Yeah.
Because it's not compressed, it's not powered or whatever's going on in there. So already I knew that I liked old stuff, And the PAF, when I tried it in the guitar, I did some takes, and I thought, okay, I want to go down that road for my signature pickup. So I basically A/B'd all their pickups and chose my favorite one and did a twist on that for the bridge pickup. For the neck pickup, I use it so rarely anyway that I decided to keep the PAF 36. But if you would switch them on the guitar and put the PAF on the bridge and the Fortitude on the neck, it would still be in the same ballpark. They're in the same family. Yeah. You asked me if I was a fan of Gibson, and I am. I'm a fan of Fender. I'm a fan of all great instruments, and I wanted this signature Charvel to be a tribute to great guitars and to good-looking guitars. And I wanted the collar of the guitar to look like your grandmother's table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And very familiar and warm. And I wanted the blocks on the neck also, which you don't usually find on Fender guitars or Italians or so it's a combination of things that you've seen before, but put in a way that you maybe didn't see before. And it feels right. Something about this guitar that feels right. And the pickups, the PAF 36 and the Fortitude also come with this chrome sort of block that resonates with the neck. So there's a lot of thinking, involved in this. My brain hurts after all this thinking.
It's excellent, yeah. So it's like a mix of vintage with some kind of contemporary cutting-edge features.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You think so well, man. I wish I said that. Yes, exactly. It's that. It's a tribute to beautiful guitars. I don't have the pretension to come up with anything new, and maybe that's why I only used things that were used in the past. I don't have the pretension to reinvent guitars, or anything. It's just love guitar, and I love that signature guitar, I'll be really happy to use it on stage.
You use quite a lot of kind of clean tones as well in the studio, like kind of ethereal sounds, moody sounds. Do you tend to use a single coil guitar when you're doing that in a recording environment?
Oh yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, of course. I have a few old tellies that I'll use for parts to add some attitude, to add some some personality to a song or an intro. For example, on From Mars to Sirius, the whole intro for Flying Whales was recorded with a telly. Some parts with a neck pickup, some parts with a bridge pickup. But it gives that really, I don't know, there's like a punch in the mids with these single coil.
Yeah. You don't have a tone control on your guitar, on your signature model. Is that something that you just don't use at all? Or, I mean, on stage, it's just something, it's just distraction that you don't need.
I don't know what people do with that. I have no idea, man.
I don't use one either.
I never met anybody who uses that stuff because I hang out with metalheads mostly. But at the beginning, that knob in our world, in our rehearsal space, was called the knob that doesn't do anything. It's just make sure it's all the way up. But it sounds funny. So when I had the first time we designed the guitar just for us, we go, by the way, that knob, get rid of that.
I was when I picked it up, I think I was expecting the guitar to be heavier than it was. It's actually quite a nice weight for a Telecaster model from mahogany. Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah. Does it weigh more than your previous signature models?
No, it's actually the ones I use on stage are a little heavier. Okay. But I'm gonna start using that model because even though it's already for sale and everything, I received one prototype in my studio in New York, and I received one here that I gave to a friend, and I'm like,
they're really hard to get.
We're doing an interview about the guitar, and all I have is this. So I'm about to receive one. So
cool.
Explore a little more.
I noticed you had the whammy pedal there as well. That's still part of your
Oh yeah. Ever since I started using it, I can't stop. I love it. The options are so many different options, so many things you can do, and add so much spice. It's like somebody who never put pepper or salt on in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, here, try this. So especially in the studio environment, when you have a killer riff that is sort of fat, you want to double it with something to make it even fatter. You could use the whammy on the fat option. I mean, it's endless what you can do with the whammy. I freaking love it.
How much gain do you use? Is it less than people might think?
Yes.
On your amps, yeah.
It is. I realized same thing early on. I want to say when we were recording the Link, so that's back in 2002. That it was never enough gain for me when I was tracking. When you have one track of guitar, you always want to add some more gain because you don't get this, the power really. But as soon as you double your track and you listen to it stereo, it becomes so powerful. So we also, at the time, we were not only doubling but quadrupling the guitars. So 4 tracks of the same thing going on,
right? And
it ends up being a wall of sound, a little inhuman. So I started to dial back. I want to say, 15 years ago, I started to dial like 1 millimeter per month. So
weaning yourself off, yeah,
very carefully. So I'll be like to my sound engineer or to Christian, the other guitar player, watch me. I'm gonna dial down the gain, and then I go, from 10 to 8, and then see how good it sounds, and then we start playing together. It goes back to 9:30 to 9.5. So it's hard for me to dial back, but now really on the EVH that we use, I'm almost at noon,
okay.
On the gain knob, which was inconceivable back in the day. It had to be to the max, no matter what. And now I understand less gain equals more dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You use quite a lot of cool little feedback and harmonic things. Does that limit what you can do when you wind gain back, or does it just mean you have to be more controlled with your guitar, with your hands, basically?
Yeah. You got to be a better player. Use less gain for sure, because it becomes more precise. It's a bit scary actually to hear every single stroke so well, because when the more gain you put, the more forgiving it is. You can make a few mistakes. There's so much gain that it gets lost a little bit in the tsunami of sound. But yes, when you dial back, you got to be more experienced, seasoned. You got to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Obviously, you become quite famous for the pick rake, the scrape.
Yeah, the scrape.
Yeah. Is that? I mean, I remember interviewing Slash. Even Slash was talking about it. He's like, he was trying to learn how to do it, and
that's funny.
Is that knowing that you're kind of known for a technique? Is it still part of your technique going forward, or are you're evolving all the time as a player? Is it something that you drop in where it's appropriate, kind of thing?
It's still there. It's still there. I have a lack of. I never really studied guitar. I didn't have any lessons from anyone, not one, nothing. I just learned on my own. I did some piano. I had piano lessons, but I never had a guitar lesson. So when I grab a guitar, I have really my own approach, and I use it as a percussion instrument rather than, I'm not doing all these technical solos and stuff. So it's a very organic, almost physical relationship I have with my guitar. And that pick scrape, whatever you call it, came out on a tour on the Link. And I remember it was a moment where I felt on fire on stage with my bandmates. It was a very, very special time where we felt that the band was becoming something strong, something solid that had a wheel on its own, almost like bigger than us, the four of us. And I remember being almost overwhelmed sometimes during the shows by this energy that we were creating together, and the crowd responding. There was this thing going on, and it was small tours. We were almost unknown at the time, and we'd go to Switzerland and Belgium. That's the most far we would go. French-speaking countries. Basically. And we were doing these tours and driving the van and unloading the gear and everything. And I remember there was one time in particular where it was the shows were so intense for us, and there was only 70 people in the room. But that sound came during at that time, when it was almost not me doing it. It was just like, it was a bit out of control, and this part in a song where I go, I hit the high notes and I slide my hand down. That's what I'm supposed to do, but I started to do it with my other hand, add some movements. I was basically very, very inspired and taking off from the ground almost during these shows. It was tremendous energy. And it was born then. And at the time we were writing songs for the next album, which is From Mars to Sirius, that's when I introduced that sound, and it's all over the album because I was like, oh my God, this is great. So Christian asked me, how do you do that freaking sound? It looks like you're tearing a metal sheet. So I don't want to say I invented it. I think some other people did it accidentally, like I did it accidentally, but maybe they didn't harness it and overuse it, milk it so much, like I did for the next album.
Have you kind of, with the low end, with how physical your picking hand is and how that dynamic, is that kind of influenced where you've headed tonally?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I think any guitar can sound good if you really play with your heart, right? And any amp, it's mostly the way you play soft or strong, or you can tell a lot. You can do a lot with just your body, with your intention, and how much you're going to pound the strings. Sometimes you could kill the low end if you go too hard. It's going to be out of tune. But it could be also a certain sound. If you go really hard, the strings are going to vibrate more. Therefore, the tuning is not going to be as perfect, but there's going to be an emotion. If you go really, really strong on a straight note, it's not going to go bang. It's going to go bang. You know, this bang, because the strings are vibrating more, and then they calm down. All of that is what I love. And also, I'm guided by the sound. I'm listening to what I do. So when I jam with my brother, sometimes we do things and we just stare at each other and we do stuff, and I listen carefully what's going on. And each time something is happening that I like, I think, well, what was I doing? Oh, yeah, I was going really hard. So, okay, I'm going to keep going hard.
Do you think that's yeah. So you're kind of like trusting your instincts as a player.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm jumping in a pool, basically when I play. It's extremely physical for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's tiring. It doesn't mean that it's big effort. It's physical. Like you said, the physicality of it is, for me, key. When other people have their theory together, for me, it's physicality and emotion. It's extremely emotional and physical. When other people are, thinking about stuff and they're writing and they have their theory together, I don't have all that. So
no. One thing we noticed about your model and a lot of Charvels is that the neck contour is great for that higher end of the fretboard playing.
Yeah.
Is that something that you felt the benefit of when you switched from other guitars back to your Charvel?
Yes. Yeah, because now I'm starting to explore the high notes. I was exclusively rhythmical, but now I'm starting to play a little solo here and there and add a few notes and arrangements, and that's where you go get the magic, where the high notes are, especially if you with a little delay. Anyway, I think, it's something I wanted to explore too, and the people at Charvel were extremely helpful. Mike Tempesta, who's my guy at Charvel, he's also working for Fender, which is really cool because Jean-Michel is with Fender, our bass player, and I'm at Charvel, and Christian is at Jackson, so it's all the same.
Excellent.
And EVH too.
Yeah.
So it's basically a Tele. It's funny because I didn't start on a Tele shape. I started on a Flying V. I used a Les Paul, and these are great guitars. But then, growing up, I started to be more and more fascinated by the Tele shape, and I think, for me, it resonates as one of the most elegant guitar shape you can imagine. Maybe because of some of the incredible players that use them, the Rolling Stones and guys like that, they were using the Tele, so it gave that aura to the shape. It's a more mature shape than a Warlock or a
It's timeless.
Absolutely.
Timeless design, yeah.
Timeless.
Wanted to quickly ask you about EVH amps. Yeah. What are you using at the moment? What have you been using for tracking for the next record?
Okay, so I'm actually excited and proud to say that in the studio I have unlimited options. I can rent. Worst case, if an amp is too expensive or too hard to find, I can always rent it or ask a friend to lend it to me, or I can buy some stuff too. But also brands send me stuff pretty easily because the band is at a level where I can borrow gear left and right, so I have access to everything I want, basically. But I'm proud to say that in the studio I use the gear that I use on stage, mostly. Of course, I sprinkle it with a few, old amp heads I have, here and there. I have an old dual rectifier Mesa, like it was one of the early ones made that was a bit too expensive to make, so then they changed the components and stuff, and I have one of those good ones from the very beginning. So I use that to double some parts and stuff like that. I have our tour manager, Taylor, who was also my guitar tech for years, let me use his Diesel. I used a few Marshalls. I used the Fender Twin Reverb and stuff, but mostly EVH. Yeah, EVH, the Stealth and the EL34, and the other one, the simple one. I don't know how it's called, but the first one that came out.
Yeah.
So I used a lot of EVH on the album. 90% of everything you're gonna hear on the next record is EVH.
Cool. If you could sum up what you love about EVH, how would you describe it?
It's solid. I need a few words to describe it.
Yeah.
It's generous. It's generous. It's very generous. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's like a cozy pillow with a lot of gain.
Nice.
You don't need to crank it too much. And if you want a lot of gain, just go for it, and you'll get what you need. Fantastic depth. The depth of it. The tone is incredible. Honestly, I A/B'd with a lot of amps for what we do. EVH is absolutely phenomenal. Maybe it'll change in a few years. I don't know. But for now, I can't find better. And all of my friends would say, no, dude, try this. And I'm like, not impressed.
That's good. That's a good recommendation. Could you maybe tell us where you see your tone going in the future, like from a guitar point of view, maybe, without saying too much?
That's good. Yeah, I can see pretty clearly where it's going. My sound, my guitar sound is less gainy, more dynamic, and I'm becoming more rock in my approach of guitar. I like the before I was 35, before my 30, early 30s. I liked my sound to be a little from another planet, like super distorted, crushing, scary. I liked my sound scary. And as I become a big boy, an adult, I like my guitar. I like my weaknesses. I embrace my weaknesses because I can't hide them anymore. So I like the guitar to be fragile a little bit. I like it to be not so gainy. I like it to be, he's using a Tele, or he's using a Gibson, or he's using like when you translate what you're using behind, when you translate what you're doing with your hands, on a certain leak, you could be making a little mistake, but it adds the charm, That's what rock does. That's what some of the greatest guitarists in the world did, like Jimi Hendrix. It was full of life.
Yeah. So that sounds good.
So I want to say I'm adding a little bit of that, a little bit of honesty, a bit of realness. Is that a word?
Yeah. That sounds really interesting where it's going. Owning a studio and being in that world of production, what if you could distill it to one big lesson that you've learned about guitar playing from seeing the bigger picture of production? Is there any advice that you could pass on to other players having had that experience as a producer?
I would say, why have to be generous when you record. You have to give your best. You can't be conservative and think I just have to be tight and it'll do. The difference is if you really give your best, maybe you're not going to hear exactly your performance because there's other instruments at the same time going on. But if you do your absolute best, it's what's going to give the depth to a recording. Now I'm talking to a guitar player that is playing on an album that is not necessarily producing the album, but that's what I understand now, is that if your performance is really great, it doesn't matter if nobody's going to hear it or notice the prowess that you did. It's going to give the spirit to the recording. It could be good playing. It could be energy. It could be incredible mistakes that sound really good for the rest of the record because you hit a string that you didn't mean to play, and it's going to resonate in a weird way, but it's going to add some magic. It could be, you know what I mean? It could be great mistakes. It could be incredible performance. But you can't just be doing your thing. Okay, that's it. The album is going to be flat. You got to give something. You got to give life and magic and efforts and greatness to give you back, basically.
Good advice.
I don't know if it's good advice or not.
That is good advice, yeah. I think that's easily overlooked. That, you can't just think about
And also, I will add that there's no rules. There are some rules because, phase, what are you going to do? Phase is phase. You got to be careful with your phase. Meaning when you double an instrument or when you have two microphones on the same amp, if they're not perfectly aligned, you're going to have a phase issue.
Yeah.
That phase issue could become a great thing. It could be a plus, but it could be a mess. So that's a rule. But you could have a message on your phone from someone who sings a song, and it could end up on your record, even if it's an MP3 recorded through a cell phone, printed on a CD, and then thrown back in the machine. If you listen to an album by Portishead or Radiohead or one of these great bands, they use sounds like no matter what it is, if it sounds good, if it goes well together, maybe it's worth doing on an album. I mean, in that sense, there's no rules, but you got to give.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks, Jay.